So I wanted to share with you in this video what I've seen and what I've learned with the somatic experiencing. And in this case, for the sake of this video, we're going to focus on the chronic freeze response in the nervous system. And the reason I'm talking about this is because if you've been through childhood trauma, emotional neglect, parents with addictions or narcissistic abuse, or a combination of all of that, you've experienced trauma. And when you're experiencing trauma in childhood, usually our go-to trauma response is fight or flight, right? If there's a danger, we rise up to it to fight it if we have to. You can't do that when you're a child. You're no match for the adults in your life. The other response, the flight response, is you take off, you leave. Well, you can't do that either. In childhood, you can't take care of yourself. So you're basically stuck in an environment that is causing you a tremendous amount of emotional discomfort, emotional pain, shame, abandonment, and you have to live through it, right? You have to find a way to survive. And so your brain is amazing in its, ability to try to keep you alive. And it's like, okay, you can't fight, you can't take flight. And so what's left is freeze. Freeze is like, be still, don't take up space, be invisible, hold everything down. You might think that the freeze response, because you're still, means that there's no energy there. But the reality is that it takes a tremendous amount of survival energy to hold your emotions beneath the surface. So freeze is deceptive. You might look still. You might look as if you're not, in emotional dysregulation, but it's all there beneath the surface. And so what happens is in childhood, you're in this freeze response, which is the best thing you can be in when you're stuck in an environment where you don't have support and where there's a lot of trauma. Because the brain's like, okay, the quieter you are, the more you stifle, the more invisible you are, the less abuse you'll have to face. So again, in a way, it's a coping skill designed to keep you safe. Fast forward to adulthood. And what happens when you've been in the freeze response for so long, it's like you're in prison in your own body. You can even be away from the toxic environment that caused you to go into the freeze response in the first place, and you can't get out of it. There's dissociation, there's disconnect, there's a lack of thinking clearly, and there's a lack of really feeling alive. It's like you're alive, you're surviving, but you aren't alive with your passion, with your emotions, with your connection to self. And so getting out of the freeze response, we'll talk about what's needed to get out of a chronic freeze response. There's a couple of things that are needed, and I want to talk about how somatic experiencing can help, how I've seen it help people in amazing ways. Okay, so first, when it comes to the freeze response, the whole reason you went there was because you weren't safe. Your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, together with your subconscious mind, they get together and they're like, okay, Michelle's not safe. Let's disconnect her from her feelings. Let's put her in this freeze response. And at least she's alive, right? She may not be feeling much, but she's still alive. So it's not something you're doing consciously. You're not trying to be dissociated. You're not trying to be shut down. You're not trying to not have feelings. It was something that your subconscious mind and your autonomic nervous system chose for you without your conscious consent. And it was because you didn't feel safe. You weren't safe. So part of coming out of freeze is reestablishing what safe enough is, what it feels like, what it looks like. So obviously your environment plays a factor. Okay, so I'm really going to focus on people in this particular video that are out of the environment that caused them to not feel safe. So maybe their parents were super toxic. Maybe an ex was super toxic and abusive. And in those environments, they really weren't safe, right? Because they were being attacked all the time. Let's talk about how that individual is no longer in that environment, but still is in shutdown. So The nervous system, the crazy thing about the nervous system is that when it comes to intense emotions, it can really kick on fast. But when it comes to positive emotions, it doesn't pay attention to them as much as it does the negative. Bottom line, we have to just realize that our nervous system and our survival brain are biased to the negative. And, in a way there's a reason for it. It's because it wants to keep you alive and safe. So if there's something safe over there, it's going to be like, yeah, that's nice. There's danger over here. I'm not going to stop looking over here because there's something dangerous over here. So I don't care about that. That's what it does. And even if you leave the environment, it doesn't just, suddenly decide to look around and see other things of safety. No, it's hyper focused still on what has made you feel not safe. Here's the crazy thing. Here's the crazy thing about our brain. When we have these programs that we aren't safe, and we are always thinking and creating a lot of thought energy about not being safe, then our reticular activating system, the part of our brain that helps us to create filters in our life as to what is important to us and what is not important to us, creates a filter of, I'm not safe. And so things that would allow you to feel safe, things that would give evidence for you to feel safe, you won't notice them. Because your reticular activating system, if it is programmed with the belief, I'm not safe, people aren't safe, it is going to be pointing out to you all the time evidence to support that belief. So not only do you have the past trauma that set up the beliefs, but now your own brain is programmed to keep them alive and you're stuck in this chronic freeze response. What can you do? And that's where somatic experiencing comes in, because most people, when they're at this place, first of all, it's horrible. You don't feel alive. I remember being there. I remember thinking, like, is there an emotional defibrillator that somebody can put on my chest so that I can start feeling again? Because I was so disconnected from my feelings, from my emotions. Okay. So it's not a place anyone wants to stay stuck at. When you become an adult, it's just super maladaptive, and it keeps you from having real connections and healthy connections with others and with yourself. So back to somatic experiencing. What I found to be super amazing with somatic experiencing is the fact that you're not just talking about what happened, because talking about trauma, first of all, can feel horrible because you start activating, like you're talking consciously about it with somebody and your subconscious is always listening and always paying attention. So as you're talking about things, it's bringing up the sensations in your body associated with what you're talking about. That doesn't feel good. On top of that, here's another piece of the trauma puzzle, right? On top of that, we have what's known as a protective self. And when you've been through trauma, this protective self, again, it's like buddy with your autonomic nervous system, your subconscious mind, your survival brain, your limbic network. They're all trying to keep you alive, not happy, not thriving, but alive and surviving. And the protective self loves to talk about the story. It's like, yeah, this happened and that happened. And then I remember this and this happened in this detail. Then he said this, and then this happened. And one day this happened. And then last year, 10, 20 years ago, this happened, and 5 years ago. And this is what's going to happen. Your protective self loves to get stuck in what's known as story, which is the details as to why the belief I'm not safe should be in your system and should continue. And the reason is because as you're focused on the story, you are not focusing on the wound, which is the pain that happened. It's what's underneath the freeze response. You don't got to look at that. You don't got to feel that. You don't got to let it come up in your body. Let's look at all the stuff that happened. And this is why you don't feel safe. So there's the other layer that makes it hard to heal. And it makes it hard to do so with just talking alone. Trauma is stuck in the limbic area of your brain, but it's not something that can be processed with your thoughts. Trauma is subcortical, and that means it's beneath the cortical regions of your brain. And the cortical regions of your brain, that's where thinking, cognitive thinking is, executive functioning is. That's way up there. Trauma's way down here, and you can't get to it with words and with thoughts. So that's another reason why just talking about it makes it challenging. So in a somatic experiencing session, what we do is we do talk about it, but we bring the body with us. And trauma resides in the body. Your emotions reside in the body. And the goal when it comes to somebody that's been in a chronic freeze response, the goal is little by little, because with the nervous system, with nervous system regulation, less is more and slow is faster. Okay. And what I mean by that is if you try to move too fast with the nervous system, you can re-traumatize it and makes it harder to, work toward moving forward. But when you go slow and you let things sink into the nervous system, then it starts to feel like it can move forward. Okay. So the goal is little by little to establish a felt sense of safety. And for some people, they've never felt that. And it's completely foreign to them. And for some people to just feel in their body is super uncomfortable. Think about it. If your coping skill has been to keep you out of your body and out of your feelings and overly focused on what's outside of you so that you're hypervigilant as to danger, you've never really taken time to feel what's going on inside. So it's something we do little by little. And the goal of it is to help your nervous system to learn how to regulate itself once again. So basically, our nervous system is designed to keep us in what's known as our window of tolerance, right? There's a nice flow to the nervous system. It's going up in the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic brings it right back down. It's a nice, steady flow. Trauma flings you outside of it and keeps you outside of it, or you're flung way back down into disconnection, way up into anxiety, and there's no steady flow. So in a somatic experiencing session, we're kind of teaching your nervous system, first of all, to find a place in the body that feels safe enough, right? Because saying the word safe sometimes is a trigger for people. So they might feel areas in their body, and it's usually in this section where it feels very unsafe. This is where our emotions get stuck. So it's about finding a place in the body that feels slightly safe, even just a tiny bit. And what we're trying to do with the nervous system is the nervous system is hyper-focused on the danger, and it doesn't want to, it's like it's got blinders on and it doesn't want to see anything else. The problem with that is that it also keeps you outside of your window of tolerance for that reason, and it keeps you in whatever trauma response is your dominant trauma response. And in this case, we're talking about the freeze response. So we start like showing the nervous system like, ooh, check this out. Hey, psst, check this out. Do you see this tiny little place in your pinky finger that feels okay? And the nervous system just kind of takes a little bit to register that it can kind of stop focusing on the danger for a second and notice. And then we start pendulating and we start going back and forth to teach the nervous system. What we're basically doing is we're regulating the nervous system in the flow that it should have been in the first place. Now, the goal of this is to, again, establish that there can be a felt sense of safety in the body. Before you can get out of freeze, you have to feel that felt sense of safety, and it can take time. And that felt sense of safety, what the goal is to increase its ability to notice uncomfortable sensations in the body. Trauma causes us to bury so much intense emotions that we felt at a time in our life that those emotions were overwhelming. And so when we're coming out of freeze and we're working on our trauma and we're working through recovery, what was buried starts to come up with the intensity we felt it at the age we felt it. There's a difference between getting frightened at night at, 20 years old and something scares you, you hear a loud sound, and 2 years old. But when that 2-year-old fear and nobody was there to tell you, oh, that was nothing. That was the wind just banging on the window. You're totally safe. I'm here for you. You're fine. When you don't get that fear that you're forced to feel all alone gets buried. And when it starts coming up, you feel it as if you're that 2-year-old. It's an overwhelming thing that you feel like your life is on the line. And so somatic experiencing is designed to help you little by little to start feeling more and more comfortable with sensations in your body, getting a little bit closer to them, backing off when it's too much, a little bit closer to them. Because once you can get that sense, that felt sense of safety inside, is when you can continue to move forward. But your body's not going to let you until it knows that you're safe enough to do so. So it's been amazing to really see the power of this tool in my own healing journey. I did a video not too long ago where I talked about my somatic experiencing. In fact, I'll leave the link here for you, and how I went into the freeze response and my brain just blocked out the memory, and that freeze response, how it changed my life and how it kept me stuck, and how the somatic experiencing really opened my eyes to a lot of things. So I shared that with you guys. And I also see how it's helping people in their lives. Like I'm watching them shift right in front of me. It is absolutely amazing because, again, you're not just talking logically about what happened. You're bringing the nervous system online with you in the session, and you're helping it to release any survival energy that's stuck. You're helping it to do whatever it needs to do to get unstuck, because trauma can feel like, you think of a car that's a manual car and it's stuck in first gear. Well, you can drive and drive and drive. You can ship it across the country. It's still going to be stuck in first gear until you fix the clutch or whatever's getting stuck that's keeping it in first gear. It's the same thing with our nervous system. Years can pass, but if the nervous system is stuck because of trauma, we have to find ways to help it to get unstuck. And I found somatic experiencing to be absolutely amazing. If you've ever tried it, let me know in the comment section below.